In the last part of this build, I attempted to machine off all the weld, but it ended up as one of the biggest and most frustrating catastrophes of my career. When I had finally resolved the issues, I ended up accidentally cutting the chain link in half. Now let's see if I can redeem myself and get this project moving along again. Well, as you can see, we're here in my office again. Now, I know it's only been a few weeks since the last time, but I've totally revamped the decor in here. It's still a work in progress, but we're getting there. Here, let me show you real quick. I've got all my little knickknacks kind of gathered in the corner over here. I redid all the movie posters and flags and all that stuff. This wall back here is kind of a red wall now. You can see the little mock-up I've got there of the cross. It's going to be a giant version of that little neon cross eventually. Shockingly expensive for a 6-foot-tall neon cross. Who would have guessed? Got my buddy down here wondering what in God's name I'm doing and what I'm talking about. Now, the real reason we're in here is to talk about today's video sponsor, Raid Shadow Legends. Raid Shadow Legends is a totally free, turn-based MMO-style mobile game with many different game options, including PvP and PvE. Now, Raid had asked me to literally spell out this game for you, so let's get to it. R is for the ridiculous amount of champions. There are already several hundred champions in the game, with more being released every single month. So down here, you've actually got this index of champions where you can browse all the different factions and all the different champions within them, regardless of whether or not you actually have the champions. Now, this is Elegaius, the champion I'm trying to get. It's pretty mean looking, but I'm mainly interested in this weapon. Kind of hard to show it here, but it's kind of like a pole sword, maybe a glaive or something like that. Honestly, I'd like to build this thing someday. Leave me a comment down below if you'd like to see it. A is for the awesome player factions. As you can probably guess, I enjoy anything with a dark or evil theme to it, so the corrupted factions are my favorite. Specifically, the undead hordes and the demon spawns, right up my alley. I is for investment. As a long-term gamer myself, I understand how important personal investment is in a game. With Raid, you can build out your squad with an insane amount of champions and an equally insane amount of upgrades, like artifacts, gear, potions, level ups, so on and so forth. With that, you can take on an enormous amount of dungeons, bosses, and even other players in the arena. Furthermore, there are updates being added to the game every single month to continually increase your gameplay options. Finally, D is for the Doom Tower. Now, if you've watched this channel before, you know that I love an insane challenge. The Doom Tower is the ultimate dungeon in the game with the highest level of reward. In fact, it's got 120 floors of challenges with a dozen unique secret rooms for each difficulty level. Plenty to keep you busy in the end game, especially since it resets every single month. With all this exciting stuff and more coming to Raid, what are you waiting for? Use my link in the description or scan this QR code to get insane bonuses. We're talking about the epic champion, Kellen the Shrike, and other useful things such as energy refills, magic potions, and XP brews. Here, let's make that QR code a little bit bigger so you can scan it. And since it's Raid's birthday, there's even more gifts coming. All new and existing players can get a bunch of free gifts. Once you're in-game, after clicking on my links, just enter code 4YearsRaid to get 4 legendary skill tomes plus other useful stuff. Simple. Once you're in and crushing your enemies, come find me under the name Pretty Hit Machining, and if you're fast enough, you can join my clan. So, just hit the link in the description, and I'll see you on the battlefield. Alright, so one final note on the whole cutting the bolt in half thing. I was sitting here wondering, how did I not calculate that out correctly? How did I not think about the fact that I would drill through the bolt? And I realized I actually did consider that. In fact, I actually did plan it out. I planned the whole depth precisely. I planned out the threaded portion of the handle precisely. I made sure that I wasn't going to hit that bolt. But what happened is, all the issues with cutting the handguard in half, I ended up removing quite a bit of extra material in that process, inadvertently, through a large series of screw-ups. And then when I had the welding nightmare, where I had to re-weld it 9 hours straight, basically, I took so many milling passes. They were light passes, but it ended up being quite a bit. And so this material is quite a bit shorter than it was planned out to be, is what I'm trying to say. However, the icing on the cake is I was supposed to drill the hole 1.5 inches exactly. And while I was drilling it, I was like, oh, let's just over drill it a bit to give myself a little bit extra room, right? Because, the drill bit doesn't have a perfectly square end on it. It's rounded over, right? So I wanted a little extra clearance for the handle. you know, so on and so forth, not thinking back months ago when I actually planned out the dimensions of this thing. And long story short, multiple screw-ups leading to a much larger screw-up. So I'm going to deal with this thing later. I'm going to finish up the machining here. There's not much I can do about that bolt for the moment. I'm probably just going to weld it inside the hole. That's probably the best bet. All right, let's get going on tapping this. And then we can do the circular decorations on either side of the hole. And that should pretty much finish up the machining at least. Oh, there's one more detail that makes this bolt cutting incident much more serious than I initially realized. The issue is I was using that bolt to hold together the two halves of the handguard so that when I welded it, it didn't, you know, warp up, the pieces didn't warp away. And well, you can probably guess, now there's clearance. I don't know if you can really see it. Yeah, there's quite a bit of clearance under there. That end is picked up. So same thing on the bottom. You see daylight through there. I can't really tell on the viewfinder, but it's not good. That's gonna take another whole plan. Well, the hits keep on coming. I don't know how many mistakes I can make in a row, but I'm definitely setting the world record here. I'm actually not even sure what happened. I'll have to review the footage. What I was trying to do is I was trying to feed the table away from the chuck so that I had clearance for the tap so I could move the table over. And I think I did it the wrong way, so the blade was moving towards the machine. I'm not really sure how I could have done that, but I think I threw the wrong lever when I was trying to fix it. So then the table started going this way and it shattered the tap. It may have broken before then, I'm not even sure, but it all happened in a span of, you know, 1 second, I guess. But we got a trashed collet. It's all destroyed on the outside there. The tap, well, I guess I don't have to worry about damaging it with that pipe wrench anymore. That's the end of that. I've never seen a tap this big break before. And honestly, I'm shocked that the machine didn't break or something didn't break in the machine, because that had to have been a lot of force. But everything in the machine seems fine. It runs perfectly. I just got to replace that collet, and I got to get the other half of that tap out there. That is going to be awful. Can't wait. Look at these threads. The good news is this might be salvageable. You can see right here when the tap kind of twisted to the right, it must have torn up, partially torn up some of these threads right here. The rest of them do not look bad. It's just some on the right side. So let's see if I can try to like remove these and then run a new tap through it. So I started the camera a little bit late, but a random pro tip: if you ever break a tap off like that, especially one that big, the thing about taps is they're very, very strong, but very, very brittle. So I just used a punch and a big hammer, and I just hit it enough times that it basically shattered the tap into little tiny pieces, and I was able to pull them out. So at least that's one problem down. I just realized in a viewfinder you can see the holes, the vertical hole where the eye bolt went through. I guess that would have been noticeable to me at some point, so it probably wouldn't have been a catastrophic and fatal failure later on. Maybe? Alright, I don't know if the tap handle was in the way of the camera. I just suddenly realized the angle may not work, but I've gotten the tap started. This is the new tap. I think I followed the previous hole. It seems straight in both directions, so I'm just going to continue to hand tap it here. Extremely difficult. I have to use this pipe on the handle here. It's kind of like carving its way through all of the debris in there and the kind of partially torn threads and everything. I'm pretty sure I've already ruined this tap as well. I heard some cracking, so I'm just gonna keep going until I can at least clean it up enough to take a look. Alright, we've got a few threads in there. It looks pretty salvageable, I'd say. You can see a little bit of damage right there at the bottom. Doesn't look too bad. You can see the teeth on the tap are broken off at the end here. It's right about there. I'm gonna go a few more turns just to make sure I've gotten through the bad stuff, and then I'll swap out the tap just so I don't ruin a third tap. By the way, these taps are like $250 new. That is one expensive hole. That's all I can say. Alright, well, fatality number infinity. I broke the end of this tap wrench off. That's fantastic. Alright, I'm using my biggest adjustable wrench here. I don't know if you can see how big it is. It's a 24 inch. Hopefully this gives me enough torque, and hopefully this tap doesn't break. Alright, this tap's got several chipped teeth. It's getting really hard to turn. I'm afraid I'm going to break it. I think we've gotten enough. I've got like 4 or 5 threads. We're probably over half an inch deep now, so I'm going to switch to a better tap, and hopefully I don't break that one too. Much easier. Well, I say that while holding a 2-foot long wrench, so. Okay, well that was uneventful, thankfully. You can see we've got threads all the way to the end there. Looks pretty good. You can see the damage right there. Not awful. We have plenty of thread, plenty of strength. Alright, let's handle these 2 little circles on either side here real quick and then move on from there. So I was just about to finish up for the night after putting these 2 circles in there, and I realized, I don't know how well you can see that, but they're off. I'm somehow keeping the streak going here. That one is too far to the right, that one is too far to the right. I haven't confirmed this, but what I think happened is, I originally did the math that these 2 circles would be 1 3/4 inches from the center hole. So when I had this center hole lined up with the spindle, I zeroed out my display over here, and then, you know, I've been doing all my work based off of that location. I think when the tap broke, it shifted the whole thing over slightly, and I didn't realize it, so I was still thinking, you know, zeroed out on the display was the center of this hole, and it was not. It was probably slightly to the right. And then, so I just counted over 1 3/4, put one here, went back here, 1 3/4, you know, put the other circle, and they're off. So, yeah. Luckily these are nice and shallow. I guess what I'm gonna have to do is I'm gonna have to unclamp this whole thing. I'm gonna have to realign everything perfectly again. I'll re-weld both these circles, skim it off again, and then put new circles in the right location. Should only be like 3 or 4 hours of wasted time. I should be used to it by this point. Alright, so it is now almost 2 weeks later. I actually ended up getting really sick with a sinus infection, and after my long train of repeated mistakes, I was kind of burnt out, so it all coincided for a nice little break. But here we are again. We gotta weld up these improperly placed circles. I would like to take it, but given on the incredible amount of problems trying to weld on the other parts of this, I'm just gonna make it. And then I'll mill it flat again for like the 9th or 10th time. And then I will attempt to correctly place the circles, you know, again. Side note, if you look very carefully, you can see the blue outline, just part of it, of where I had laid out where the circles are supposed to be earlier. Of course I can see it now, but when the blade was over in front of the spindle and I had the cutter sticking out, I couldn't actually see that little blue line that would have told me that I was off. So, whoops. Alright, so here we are. We are all done. I didn't bother filming any of it because it's exactly the same procedure. I just welded out the circles. I did it twice actually because there was some minor defects. Milled the whole thing flat and then put the circles back in. The funny thing is I almost screwed it up again the second time. I had basically done the math wrong. I don't know if you can really see this, but there's 2 blue marks. These are the outside of the handle when it's attached. And so I need this gap between the handle and the circle to be the same as this. And I mean, as you can see, it's very close. Same over here. I actually had it off by, I don't know, it was 50 thousandths of an inch, 1.25 millimeters. Not crazy, but you probably would have noticed it. And I definitely would have re-welded this and redone it again. So, yeah. Guess I got lucky checking and rechecking this time. Alright, so that is one major screw up that I have resolved. Let's work on the one where this thing is lifted up off the surface. I've got a pretty good idea how I'm going to do this now, since it's literally been weeks and weeks since I screwed it up originally. Had plenty of time to think about it. Let me get this set up and I'll explain what I'm about to do. Look at all the cat hair on this thing. I wonder how that happened. Do you know anything about this? Yeah, I didn't think so. Alright, pardon the noise, my air compressor is filling up in the next bay, but my idea to get this thing to kind of squash back down is very similar to how it was held in the first place. You know, this part of it anyway. I'm going to drill a hole all the way through both pieces, and ideally I would just bolt it together so I can kind of, you know, squeeze the whole thing together and then just weld over the top with a plug weld. Grind it all smooth and you'll never see. Problem is, this thickness is not enough. I had used a 1/2 inch bolt before, and here's one of the nuts. You can see it actually does fit. I mean, barely. I could potentially make a hole there, but the problem is, you know, how do you tighten that? Here's the socket for it, and it is actually larger, very slightly larger than the width of this thing, so that is not going to work without some major hassles. So what I'm going to do is I'll drill the hole and I will insert a modified bolt. I'm going to cut down the head of the bolt so it's not so wide, and then I'm going to squeeze the whole thing together with a press, and I'll weld the bolt in place while it is squeezed together so it'll stay that way. That'll eliminate the need for a nut and the clearance for it and the associated socket. So should work. It's just going to be trickier. Alright, one final note, as much as I hate to do it, we're going in dry on this one. I can't risk oil contamination of this hole because it's going to screw up my weld, and I'm just done with all that for now. Alright, so I drilled the hole 1/2 inch, and then I drilled an additional recess 5/8 of an inch. So I'll have a shoulder, you can kind of see it down there, a shoulder for a bolt to sit against. This is what I made. It's just a bolt, an Allen head bolt that I turn the head down, and then I cut it to length. So the idea is, it's just under the surface there, and you can just see it. It's just under the surface on the bottom. I cut it a little shorter because, you know, as these plates compress together, you know, it's gonna take up that gap on the bottom. So this is looking pretty good. Now I need to press this together somehow, and I have an idea for that. Okay, well, this took several hours. It actually took 2 nights or so. I ended up, in order to kind of squeeze these together, I had a bunch more clamps than this. I'm just leaving these here for the time being. You can see how tight these are. You see the bend in this clamp. It's on there really, really well. And I use my torch to heat up the whole thing to basically red hot. In fact, I can really feel that. Actually, it's almost painful having my hand that close. I actually wonder how hot this is. It's pretty hot. It has literally been like 10 minutes since I stopped. So yeah, it's up there. I don't know if I actually explained, but this is actually the bolt here. I'm trying not to get my hand too close. That is really hot. It clamped the bolt down into the recess there, and then I welded it from the underside. Can you see that? Yeah, there's the weld right there. You can just see the tack weld at the end. But I think we got it as good as we're gonna get it. Let's see. It looks like there's a gap, but I literally could not move the clamps at all. Yeah, that is, I don't see any daylight through there. I think there's just a slight chamfer on the bottom of the guard piece, and it makes it look like it's off the surface, but I don't see the bottom here. Any daylight? I do not see any daylight at all. That's about as flat as it's gonna get. I see a little daylight over there, but that's, the guard ends right there. It's very dark, so the daylight is actually under the sword itself. Alright, instead of worrying about the visual here, I figured I'll take a piece of paper. Paper is, you know, 4/1000 of an inch thick or so. And let's see, can we slide it under the guard? Can't really see what I'm doing. Just the tiniest bit, only maybe the last little bit, the corner of the paper, and then it stops. It's really just that outer edge that's lifted up slightly. But I think that's as good as it's gonna get. I don't know what I could have done better. I basically used every clamp that had enough reach to actually get to that location there. A big hydraulic press would have been good, but I don't really have anything like that. And even if I did, trying to get this sword onto it would have been a nightmare. Guess I'll call it good for now. I'll let this thing cool down for like, you know, about a week. And then we'll take these clamps off and see how it goes. Alright, so I got all the clamps off, let everything cool down. It didn't really move too much. I don't think I actually moved at all. So my little welded bolt trick seemed to work. I welded the top and bottom, and I'm actually going to try using this long end mill to just face the top of this off. I've never tried anything like this before. It could be disastrous, so I made sure to use my most expensive cutter. That's brand new, never used it ever, so I guess we'll see how it goes. Discovered that my cell phone actually has some pretty excellent low light capabilities, so I ended up switching over to that for this shot. I love how trippy this looks. It's almost mesmerizing. And of course, since I had my cell phone out, might as well add some slow-mo action to the shot. Okay, I machined the top and bottom, I had to touch up the weld on both sides and then remachine it again. It's actually like 2 days later now, but I think I'm pretty happy here. I did find it kind of interesting the way the light plays on the machine parts. You can actually see where the welds were. They're like wrinkly looking. You see up there, I mean, it's perfectly flat. It feels like glass. It just looks wrinkly. You can see how perfect that is. It's kind of funny. Over here, it's like a little duller, because I guess the machine must have some more wear in this part of the travel. And then it gets, you know, shiny over here, and then dull again. So it's just, you know, we're in an 81-year-old machine, but it's just interesting how it kind of shows up like that. All right, so last screw up to be fixed here is the chain link that's on the other side of the sword. So let's get this unclamped, let's flip it over, and let's see what we can do there. Alright, so we need to weld this thing back on from the inside. I've got it positioned perfectly, and let's see if this works. Alright, if I shine a nice bright light in here, you can see the remnant of the bolt sticking down through. I'm gonna flood this whole area with that anti-spatter stuff. I'm gonna weld it, maybe. It's actually pretty deep if you look at it from this way. I'm not even sure if I can reach it, but ideally I can weld it. And then I'll run the tap through it again to clean up the threads if any spatter gets in there, because otherwise it's going to require much more severe solutions. Alright, as you can see at the very bottom of that hole, there's like 3 significant tacks on there. At the bottom of the hole there, you can kind of see those BBs. Very hard to get the light and the camera at the same time. Let's see if they're stuck. Doesn't appear to. I think there might be one that's stuck. Let's run that tap through there real quick and see if we can clean that up. Oh yeah, I got this sweet Greenfield tap wrench. This is an old school one. It's probably 3 times heavier than the one I broke. So tool upgrade, yeah, not too bad. It's just a little resistant. I'm not even using any lube because I'm trying not to contaminate that area again in case I need to weld it, but that's it, it just bottomed out. Pretty good. Alright, now we are onto the pommel. I am going to be carving it out of this 3-inch square stock here. I was originally going to do the angles with a bandsaw, and by angles I mean these angles here, as you can see from my highly technical blueprint. I've used a bandsaw in the past, it works out pretty well. It's a little bit finicky trying to get all the angles exactly the same, but it's no big deal. However, my bandsaw is in the bay through that door, which is unheated, and it is currently -6 degrees, and I really don't want to deal with it. So in the interest of using this milling machine a little bit more, kind of working out some of the bugs a bit more, getting more familiar with all the changes I've made, I'm just gonna do it here. I figure it'll come out really accurately too, because, for example, I'm making this first cut here. This is, here, flip this around, these are the short cuts at the end. That's pretty much what I'm starting with. And I've got to stop on the end here so that I can just flip it, you know, 3 times after my first cut, and then all the cuts will be exactly the same depth, exactly the same, you know, position and so forth. So it should be very accurate with minimal work. If we spring over here for a second, you can see I've already faced off the end. It's nice and flat. It's perfectly perpendicular to all the sides, just to give me a good starting point. All in all, should be a pretty simple operation. It's just gonna be, once I get the shape of the thing, all these angles done. I can't really show it to you here, but there's a 45-degree chamfer to all the angles as well. Maybe I'll put it up on the screen if I edit this later. I will probably take the stock and put it in a V-block so it's angled at 45 degrees, and then just repeat the cuts. Something like that, but stay tuned. We'll see how it goes. So I happened to catch this during filming, but this is how I usually do things. I keep a large variety of source material images on my phone, so while I'm working, I can check and recheck if something looks correct. Alright, here she is, fresh off the milling machine, burrs and all. You see the surface finish is not that great, but I wasn't shooting for a good surface finish. Still, I've seen worse, especially considering this is mild steel, it tends to be pretty gummy and leave a kind of nasty surface finish. But yeah, I'm pretty happy with this. I'd say it looks pretty good. We've got everything we need, all the bevels are done, everything kind of lines up just about right. Okay, so there's sort of a jump cut here due to a lack of filming, but I ended up just cutting the pommel off of the larger piece of stock, milling the cut end flat, and now I am drilling it so it can be threaded to attach to the handle itself. Alright, so one of the handiest things about tapping on a milling machine is this little tool right here. This is a spring-loaded tap follower. It's actually pretty tough, but it's designed to go into the center hole on the back of any tap. So you can just kind of do this, and then you can press down, the spring is keeping tension, and now you can, manually turn the tap and it will go in perfectly straight. Normally I would power tap, but this is a big tap, it's just a lot of torque, and I'd rather just do it by hand, I suppose. No real reason for it. The machine can probably do it, I've just never tried it. I'm only tapping, one hole here, so who cares how long it takes. Probably help if I put the tap wrench on first. Alright, final step here is just a little countersink and we're good to go. Alright, that's it. Nice clean tapped hole. This thing is actually done, other than just hand sanding it to give it the final finished look. Let's go get on that right now, in fact. Alright, that's about it for this pommel here. I would say we're done. Sanded it out to 120 grit. It's probably as far as I'll go. It's slightly rough, but clearly the Dragonslayer is not some polished piece of fine art, so I'm calling this good. It's pretty consistent finish. Everything kind of lines up pretty well. I intentionally softened up all these lines and bevels just to kind of make it so it doesn't look quite so machined. I mean, it's still pretty straight and nearly perfect, but Godot didn't have access to a milling machine, so it needs to look somewhat natural. And besides the fact that I basically screwed everything up numerous times, like introduced enough imperfections that I would say we're looking pretty good here. This is a hefty chunk, by the way. This is a solid 6 pounds, almost on the dot. And I did make this removable so that you can unscrew it and throw it at your opponent to end them rightly, of course. Tiny side note here, but this actually took me 3 days worth of hand sanding to get it to look like this. The problem is when you're sanding, say one of these little bevels, if you put a little too much pressure, say on the left side, like right here, this line moves outwards, and then it doesn't match up with this line on this side of the bevel. And then so you gotta sand this one a little bit, but now they're both, a little bit off. Like this part is wider than it is down there, so you gotta sand it down there a little bit more, sand it down here a little bit more, on and on and on. And then finally, when you get everything perfectly matched up, it looks like, it's pretty good like it is now, but then you realize that this line is off, so then you have to do more sanding, and then, on and on and on. I just I would spend an hour on it. I'd come back to it later. I'd see a new flaw. I'd sand that out. Try it later, and on and on and on and on and on. But I think I've got everything that looks pretty solid, I would say. It's a little wavy here and there, but honestly, I'm a rabid perfectionist, and at this point, I know I'm done because I'm slowly making the piece worse. And I figure once I'm making it worse, I have reached the limit of my capabilities, and we are officially done. So, all done. On to the next thing. Alright, so I heard to be a real YouTuber, you gotta pimp your merch in every single video, so here we are. I paid a really excellent artist to make me some 80s inspired PHM designs, and she gave me 4 of them. I was gonna pick one, but honestly I like them all, so here they are. I got this one right here, I've got this one as well, very nice. I really like the color scheme on this one. But I think this one's my favorite. It's kind of got like Outrun / Motley Crue vibes. Definitely right in my wheelhouse. Alright, that's it. See you on the next part.